The king this morning said, hell no, hell no. The door to Buckingham Palace is slammed in your face, Harry.
And what did you expect when you brought someone like Meghan into the royal family? Okay, this is exactly what you would expect to get, okay?
This psychodrama, papers reporting this morning that King Charles finally refused to be pushed around by Harry and indulged in the constant state of chaos amongst this ridiculous accusation that they asked him to stay. He said no.
This morning, King Charles sent a message that could not be missed. Not this time. According to the latest chatter surrounding the palace, the doors of Buckingham Palace are not being opened for Prince Harry, and that decision has people talking in a major way. After weeks of noise, pressure, and claims flying in every direction, Charles appears to have drawn a hard line. The reported request for Harry to stay at Buckingham Palace was not met with warmth, flexibility, or quiet compromise. It was met with a firm no. And for many watching this royal drama unfold, that answer feels like more than a simple housing decision. It feels like a turning point. Some may call that dramatic, but the tension around this moment is real. If Charles had allowed Harry to stay after all the public pressure and behind-the-scenes confusion, it could have created a messy situation for the monarchy. Instead, the king seemed determined not to let emotions steer the wheel. With Prince William reportedly standing firmly beside him, Charles made it clear that the palace would not be pulled into a last-minute scramble.
King Charles may have just saved the British royal family. Now, I know some of you will say that is hyperbole, but I honestly do not believe that. If the monarch had allowed Prince Harry to stay at Buckingham Palace, despite all of his threats, over the past couple of weeks, I honestly believe it could have led to the beginning of an existential crisis for the royal family. So the fact that against his own heart, against what he might say his better judgment, but with the full backing of his son, the heir to the throne, Prince William, the king this morning said, hell no, hell no. The door to Buckingham Palace is slammed in your face, Harry, and Meghan too, I think is the beginning of the reclaiming of Charles's power here.
This was not just about one room, one visit, or one family disagreement. It was about control, boundaries, and the future image of the royal household. And that is where things get even sharper. Harry and Meghan may have expected the palace to bend, but this time, the response looked different. What stands out is not just that an arrangement appeared to fall apart, it is that the Sussex side reportedly pointed to an offer that, based on the palace timeline, was no longer active. Instead of letting the story drift quietly behind closed doors, palace aides pushed back publicly that same day and called the claims false. That kind of direct response is not normal palace behavior. It suggests the household wanted the record corrected fast. Then comes the timing, and this is where the whole thing starts looking even more loaded. The reported cancellation landed during the same period as a major High Court judgment linked to Harry's long-running case involving the Daily Mail's publisher.
They asked him to stay. He said no. I read last night that he didn't respond, and that even when they said your time's run out because of security and cleaning, then his team still released a statement saying he was staying there. What's the boy on, man?
This is the whole point, and this is why the eye rolling going on within the royal household just must be, for Harry, what's going on is just ridiculous. What Harry's behaviour around this, it's such a soap opera, a mess, and it's all his own doing. You know, if place hadn't been.
Royal sources cited in reports suggested there were concerns inside the palace about the optics of Harry being around reporters inside Buckingham Palace while that legal news was breaking. Charles reportedly knew the judgment date days earlier, so the obvious question becomes hard to ignore. If the date was already known, why did Harry's side wait until after the deadline to accept an offer that had been sitting there for weeks? That is not a tiny detail. That is the kind of timing that makes people wonder whether this was about planning, pressure, or something much bigger. This is what happens when one side sets a deadline and the other side tries to test the edges. The palace was not moving the goalposts mid-game. From the way reports describe it, The deadline was already there. The issue came when the request arrived late, and the expectation still seemed to be that everyone else would adjust. But King Charles does not appear to be playing that game anymore. He is dealing with cancer treatment while still keeping up with royal duties, official meetings, and a packed schedule. So the idea that he would suddenly rearrange everything over a rushed accommodation problem sounds unlikely.
Made from at Buckingham Palace, why didn't he just get on and accept it? Yet he says, well, staying in Buckingham Palace presents extra security issues. Well, I'm pretty sure within Buckingham Palace it's going to be safe for him. The whole thing is just a mess. And Harry needs to start to take a long, hard look at himself, but I'm not sure he's capable. That's the problem. And it's just gone on and on. And finally, I think the royal household just snapped and said, enough's enough.
What makes it even more telling is that Queen Camilla and Prince William were reportedly advising against a private meeting with Harry during the visit. That matters because this does not look like Charles standing alone in an emotional standoff. It looks more like a united front inside the royal household. Of course, people can feel sympathy for a grandfather who has not seen his grandchildren in years. That part is emotional, and nobody can deny it. But there is also another side. The person asking for special access was, according to reports from his own camp, unable to lock down basic travel arrangements in time. So when you step back and look at the full picture, the message becomes clear. Charles is not just reacting, he is holding the line. William is backing him. Camilla is reportedly backing him too, and palace aides are no longer letting every claim float unanswered. That is a major shift. This is not just about Harry being denied a place to sleep. It is about Buckingham Palace reminding everyone that access to the crown is not something that can be forced, rushed, or negotiated through public pressure. Making difficult decisions while facing enormous personal pressure is never simple, and reports suggest Queen Camilla has advised against a private meeting with Harry during this visit.
And it is perfectly appropriate for Charles to just tell him no. Look, we gave you plenty of time and you couldn't come to a decision and you kind of decide to accept last minute. And you know what? We have other plans. We have a life. Our life does not revolve around you and your needs and your drama and your toxicity and everything like that. And so, no, you know what? You didn't give us enough time. You're on your own. And I think this should be the message overall from now until the end of time. I think this whole debacle is an example of why Harry just needs to be cut off completely from the British monarchy. He's not on the line of succession, neither are his children. He has no place, he has no purpose, he has no future here in the British monarchy. And this needs to be done because I think if they actually sever the ties more completely, they kind of can get away from the sideshow freak show that is Sussex land at this point. Harry and Meghan are just the sideshow freak attraction of the monarchy. But unfortunately, they kind of tend to drag the headlines and drag the family into their melodrama. And the only way for the family to avoid that, the British royal family, is to just cut them off and set them loose.
At the same time, Prince William, whose relationship with his brother has been the subject of years of public discussion, is also said to fully support his father's position on the accommodation issue. From the outside, this does not appear to be one person making an isolated decision. Instead, it looks like several senior members of the royal household reached the same conclusion after considering the reported missed deadline, the legal proceedings taking place during the visit, and the differing accounts that have surfaced publicly. That level of unity naturally attracts attention. The royal family has always been known for keeping internal disagreements private, and genuine differences of opinion rarely become public knowledge. If there had been significant resistance from Camilla or William over making an exception, many royal watchers believe some indication might have appeared through media reports, especially considering how frequently other royal stories emerge. Instead, the absence of reports suggesting internal disagreement has become a talking point in itself. Now, take a moment to look at this from King Charles's perspective. Whether people agree with his decisions or not, the circumstances surrounding them are far from ordinary. Every choice he makes is viewed through both a personal and constitutional lens, making even routine decisions far more complicated than they might seem at first glance. Here is a king continuing cancer treatment while maintaining a demanding calendar filled with official engagements and state responsibilities. At the same time,
the idea that King Charles was still going to go through with this invitation, given the way that Harry and Meghan keep on humiliating him and keep on trying to cause damage for the British royal family, I think was going to be very difficult for the public to stomach. So what are you hearing about this decision?
Well, let's go back to the invitation. And I use that term very, very loosely because it was Harry who once again went to the media and said, well, of course, we'd entertain. We'd love to have an invitation, something along the lines of we'd entertain an invitation to Sandringham. Of course, he wants that because if you're invited by the king, you automatically get state funded security, which is all he cares about. He doesn't want to spend any more dollars of his own, quickly running out. And then he put on, it would be lovely for the family to meet the king. And of course, it would depend on who was there, AKA William and Catherine. And it was, at the time, it was blatant emotional blackmail for the king. However, the king and the palace did put something out, a statement out that was quite strongly worded. And he would love to meet his grandchildren. He's only met Lily once for a hot second, Archie possibly twice, but no can do. I mean, what's he going to do?
different versions of events have reportedly been circulating publicly, with Harry's representatives presenting one account, while palace sources have offered another. Despite all of that attention, Charles has not appeared to dramatically alter his schedule or organize last-minute public appearances to respond. Instead, reports suggest he has continued carrying out his official responsibilities while allowing the palace's position to speak for itself. That measured approach is often seen as part of the role expected of a constitutional monarch, even during periods of intense family pressure. Another major part of this story centers on security. Harry's security arrangements in the United Kingdom have already gone through extensive official review. The Home Office concluded that he would not automatically receive the level of publicly funded protection he requested after stepping back from official royal duties.
Versus the Daily Mail could end up delivering that speech from Buckingham Palace, as if he was some type of formal member of the British royal family. So Rebecca's not being honest. Yes, of course, it was bad, the timing and everything. But fundamentally, Brittany, it was never going to fly him staying at Buckingham Palace anyway. I honestly believe, even if he had accepted the offer by the timeline that had been provided, the offer still would have been withdrawn as a result of the Daily Mail court case. The optics are just impossible in this case.
I mean, it really is a challenge here, Dan, for Charles on multiple levels. Because again, he wants to see his grandchildren. I don't even think he wants to see Harry that much. He probably just really wants to connect with his grandchildren just in case the worst should happen. And you have all this chaos, all this toxicity, everything that Harry brings to the table now, and Meghan, which it just doesn't really make it worth it for Charles. And then you have the added burden.
That decision falls within the government's responsibilities rather than the king's personal authority, meaning it is not something Charles can simply change on his own, regardless of any personal feelings. Even so, the issue continues to generate debate. Some commentators have pointed out that privately funding security can involve substantial expenses, with various reports estimating the annual cost to be several million pounds. Others argue that government policy should remain separate from family relationships, regardless of who is involved. As a result, the discussion has grown far beyond one family's disagreements and evolved into a broader conversation about public funding, security procedures, and the responsibilities attached to public life. Questions about finances have also remained part of the wider public discussion. Many commentators have suggested that financial considerations may be one factor behind the continued attention given to security arrangements. While no one outside Harry's personal circle knows the full picture of his finances, the topic continues to surface whenever the security debate returns. That is why some observers frequently use the phrase, "follow the money," believing financial realities may help explain the intensity of the ongoing discussions
of this court case and Harry going after various publications within the British media, where the royal family tries to keep as much of a hands-off approach as possible because the papers, they have a right of free speech, and so they should be able to report on things. And so the British family knows that they need to be able to have that transparency with the press in certain instances, and Harry is throwing a grenade in that, and there is problems there as well. And you're right, if Harry won, he'd probably do his delivery from Buckingham Palace. He would probably make some sort of statement or do anything to show that,
He
hey,
could even
I'm
just
at
make a video,
Buckingham
Brittany.
Palace.
That's the
Yeah,
problem. He
I
could
mean, he
even
likes
just
doing
make a
videos.
video. And he's doing it from Buckingham Palace like it can't stand.
Alongside all of this sits Harry's legal action involving the publisher of the Daily Mail. The case has generated considerable public interest, with some commentators arguing that the timing has placed additional attention on an already sensitive period for the royal family. Others see it simply as a separate legal matter, moving through the courts. Either way, the overlap between the legal proceedings, the reported accommodation discussions, and the broader family tensions has created an unusually complicated situation that continues attracting headlines. When viewed separately, the security dispute has actually been unfolding for years. Its roots go back to 2020, when Harry stepped away from his role as a working member of the royal family, and the arrangements surrounding his official security changed. Since then, the issue has resurfaced repeatedly through reviews, legal proceedings, and public debate. This week's developments are simply the latest chapter in a much longer story that continues to shape conversations about Harry's relationship with the United Kingdom, the royal family, and his future visits. When Harry stepped back from his role as a working royal, his automatic access to government-funded security also changed. That adjustment was not presented as a personal decision by King Charles. Instead, it followed the same process that applies when a member of the royal family no longer carries out official public duties. Harry's request for continued protection was reviewed by the Home Office, and after further legal proceedings, the existing decision remained in place. One part of the discussion that continues to attract attention is the reported cost of private security. Various reports have estimated that Harry spends several £million each year on private protection.
William will not meet Harry on his return to the UK this July. I've been told there isn't a cat's in hell chance of this happening, even though they will be in the same country at the same time, even though they are brothers. It's not going to happen. Hell will freeze over. And at least there's one member of the royal family in William willing to stand up to this prodigal prince, the traitorous Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry. Now, my sources tell me that William, and I quote, despises his brother. You heard me right. Despises his brother.
That is a significant financial commitment, especially as public conversations continue about the couple's business ventures and long-term financial plans. Because of that, many commentators have questioned whether those ongoing costs may be one factor behind the renewed focus on official security arrangements. Of course, only Harry and those closest to him know exactly what motivates every decision. No one outside those private conversations can state with certainty what is driving the latest requests. However, what cannot be ignored is that the discussion surrounding security has intensified alongside continued public debate about its financial impact. That connection has appeared repeatedly across news coverage and commentary, making it a consistent part of the wider story rather than a one-time observation. At the same time, King Charles has found himself balancing multiple challenges at once. Alongside the long-running security issue, there have been ongoing legal matters involving Harry, all while the king continues carrying out a full schedule of official duties. For any family, Managing several difficult situations at the same time would be demanding. For a royal institution that places great importance on stability and continuity, the pressure becomes even greater. Through it all, reports suggest the palace has remained focused on following established procedures rather than reacting to each new headline.
No longer siblings. Another direct quote from my well-appointed source. And of course, it's been reported in the press many times, this other quote, that William effing hates his brother. Now that's strong language, but how can you blame him? After the treachery, after the betrayal, after the book Spare, the Harry and Meghan documentary series on Netflix, and of course, the awful Oprah interview with those unfounded allegations about an unnamed member of the royal family. So I'm afraid to say that Harry can dream all he likes, and Charles, who's a nice man but irredeemably weak, can hope that the boys will sort things out. It ain't gonna happen. Now, the other royal reporter that confirms that the two men will not meet, even though they're going to be in the same country and likely the same city, the same town, London town.
It is also important to acknowledge the personal side of this story. Beyond the headlines, legal matters, and official statements, Harry is still a son who has publicly spoken about wanting a relationship with his father. Reports have also highlighted the hope that Archie and Lilibet would spend time with their grandfather after several years apart. Family relationships are complicated, and many people can understand why reconnecting would matter on a personal level. That human element remains part of the story regardless of where people stand on the broader issues. At the same time, public sympathy does not automatically erase practical complications. Reports indicate there was disagreement over scheduling and accommodation arrangements, with palace sources maintaining that an important deadline had already passed. The differing public accounts that followed only added more confusion, leaving royal observers trying to understand why the two sides presented such different versions of events. For many commentators, this is where the larger issue begins to emerge. It is not simply about one missed deadline. Instead, attention has shifted toward what some observers describe as a recurring communication problem. On several occasions, public statements from Harry's team have reportedly been challenged by information coming from palace sources shortly afterward. Whether intentional or simply the result of confusion, those conflicting accounts have kept the focus on the messaging as much as the events themselves. In public life, credibility is one of the most valuable assets anyone can have. Once questions begin to surround official statements, rebuilding confidence can become a slow process.
King doesn't need this crap, excuse my French, does he? He doesn't need it.
Harry is just desperate for relevance now, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's going to fade away and disappear unless he can create more drama, make himself relevant, and get another series on.
But does he not? But does he not know? I mean, you'd agree with this, Belly. The more people aren't going, oh, poor Harry. They're going, you're just playing games, man. The world is. You know this, Rupert. Matt knows this. I know it. There's real things happening in the world, and people just go, you entitled, arrogant. That's what they think.
Wait, they do think that. And also, why is it any different, the security problems in London, to going to Birmingham? You know, that's again the point. You know, he's just as vulnerable, I would assume, if he is vulnerable, in Birmingham. And there will be a level of security always around him. Now, but he wants the bells and whistles, outriders approach to it.
That is why communication matters so much, particularly when every announcement receives worldwide attention. Observers have pointed out that other senior members of the royal family have largely avoided this type of public back and forth in recent weeks, while Harry's camp has continued to face scrutiny over conflicting narratives. Fair or unfair, those repeated questions about communication have become an important part of the broader conversation surrounding every new development. So where does all of this leave the reunion Harry was reportedly hoping for the most? After everything that has unfolded, that question remains at the center of the conversation. For weeks, speculation built around the possibility that this visit could become more than another brief stop in the United Kingdom. Many believed it could be the opportunity to begin repairing damaged family relationships. Instead, the latest reports suggest that those hopes have once again been delayed, leaving plenty of unanswered questions and plenty of room for continued public debate. One of the biggest talking points surrounds the possibility of King Charles spending time with Archie and Lilibet. According to multiple reports, that reunion is not expected to happen during this visit. For many people watching from the outside, it is naturally disappointing. Grandparents and grandchildren share a unique connection, and the idea that years have passed without seeing one another is something many families can relate to on a deeply personal level. It is easy to understand why this part of the story attracts so much attention, yet the explanation presented by palace sources paints a picture that is far more practical than emotional. Rather than suggesting there was no desire to reconnect, the reports point towards scheduling difficulties, accommodation issues, and timing problems that simply could not be resolved at the last minute. King Charles continues balancing official engagements while also undergoing cancer treatment. His calendar is planned well in advance, with state responsibilities, meetings, and public appearances arranged weeks and sometimes months ahead.
So that it can sort of add to his self-importance and create the impression...
But my argument is No, I'm having a go at both of you at all. He wants self-importance. You didn't want anything to do with the monarchy, man. So stop wanting the stuff that comes with it when you're not putting in the hard yards and working for it.
Well, you're right, because he suddenly thought the grass was greener on the other side. And suddenly, the cold reality, he's not actually now being able to generate money because everything was done for him. In the royal family, he could have had a significant part to play in the modern royal family, and people would have understood that. But he's chosen a different lifestyle, and you're absolutely right. Why doesn't he just accept his situation and get on with it and deal with the here and now rather than making it an episode of EastEnders or some soap opera?
Rearranging everything on short notice is not as simple as moving one appointment from one day to another. Every change affects security, staff, logistics, and official commitments that involve many different people. That is one of the biggest themes running through this entire story. Throughout the recent reports, palace sources have consistently emphasized planning, procedure, and established schedules. Their position appears to be that deadlines exist for a reason, and that those deadlines must apply equally, regardless of who is making the request. Whether people agree with that approach or not, it has become one of the defining features of the palace's response. Looking back over everything discussed, a clear pattern begins to emerge. There was the reported accommodation request. There was the discussion surrounding the missed deadline. There were differing public accounts from both sides. There were ongoing legal matters attracting headlines at the same time. There were continuing conversations about security arrangements. None of these developments happened in complete isolation. Instead, they overlapped, creating a situation where each new headline added another layer to an already complicated picture. That is why many observers believe this story has become much bigger than a disagreement over where someone would stay during a visit. On the surface, it may sound like a debate about accommodation, but underneath that lies a broader discussion about communication, expectations, public responsibility, and the future relationship between Harry and the institution he stepped away from several years ago. Since leaving his role as a working royal, Harry has often spoken publicly about wanting to maintain family relationships while also building a different life outside the traditional royal structure. That balancing act has never been easy. Every visit to Britain now seems to generate intense discussion before it even begins. Every meeting becomes news. Every scheduling change becomes a headline. Every statement is examined from every possible angle. That constant attention creates enormous pressure for everyone involved. On one side, Harry continues trying to define his role outside the monarchy while maintaining connections with his family. On the other side, King Charles must continue leading the institution while ensuring that official procedures remain consistent. Those two objectives do not always fit together comfortably, and that tension has become increasingly visible over the past several years. The palace also appears determined to avoid setting precedents that could create future complications. If exceptions are made once, questions naturally arise about whether they should be made again. Institutions often rely on consistency, especially ones built upon tradition. From that perspective, sticking to established arrangements may have seemed like the least disruptive option, even if it disappointed those hoping for a warmer outcome. Of course, many people will continue asking whether another solution could have been found. Could plans have been adjusted? Could the meeting have happened privately at another location? Could more flexibility have produced a different result? Those are reasonable questions, and different observers continue reaching different conclusions. At the same time, none of us have access to every conversation that happened behind closed doors. Public reporting offers pieces of the picture, but it rarely captures every detail that contributes to decisions of this magnitude. That is why separating confirmed information from ongoing speculation remains important. Reports indicate that accommodation discussions took place. Reports also indicate that deadlines became part of the disagreement. Palace sources publicly disputed certain claims, while Harry's representatives presented their own account. Those conflicting narratives became a story of their own, leaving many people trying to determine exactly how events unfolded. Communication has repeatedly become one of the biggest challenges in this broader royal story. Whenever different versions of the same event appear within hours of one another, confusion naturally follows. Public confidence becomes harder to maintain, and attention shifts away from the original issue toward questions about who has presented the most accurate account. That alone demonstrates how important clear communication has become in an era where every statement is instantly shared around the world. Meanwhile, King Charles continues carrying out his constitutional role despite ongoing health challenges. His public appearances, official meetings, and state responsibilities have continued even while receiving treatment. That reality adds another layer to every decision being made. Time is limited. Schedules are carefully managed. Unexpected changes become increasingly difficult to accommodate when official duties remain the priority. Many commentators have suggested that this practical reality may explain why flexibility was limited during this particular visit. Whether or not people agree with the final decision, they acknowledge that managing a demanding royal calendar alongside medical treatment leaves very little room for sudden adjustments. Then there is the issue of security, which has remained one of the longest-running parts of Harry's relationship with the United Kingdom since stepping back from royal duties in 2020. As discussed earlier, the security arrangements changed following that decision, and subsequent reviews upheld those changes. Over time, that issue has become intertwined with nearly every planned visit, influencing logistics, public discussion, and media coverage. Financial questions have also entered the conversation because private security reportedly involves substantial annual costs. While nobody outside Harry's immediate circle knows exactly how those expenses affect long-term decisions, commentators continue discussing the financial aspect whenever security becomes part of the news. Those conversations have fueled additional speculation, even though the full picture remains private. At the same time, Harry's legal matters have continued progressing through the courts, bringing another source of public attention. With multiple significant developments happening around the same period, every headline has appeared connected, even when the issues themselves remain legally and procedurally separate. That overlap has only intensified public interest. Still, when everything is stripped back, the heart of this story is not legal filings, accommodation requests, or scheduling calendars. It is about family. Families can disagree. Families can experience long periods of distance. Families can struggle to rebuild trust after difficult moments. Those realities exist whether someone lives in an ordinary neighborhood or inside one of the world's most famous royal households. The difference is that most families are allowed to work through those moments privately. The royal family rarely has that luxury. Every meeting becomes front-page news. Every reported disagreement becomes an international conversation. Every delay becomes another headline analyzed by commentators around the globe. That extraordinary level of attention makes reconciliation much more complicated than it might otherwise be. Even genuine efforts to reconnect can become overshadowed by debates over logistics, timing, security, public statements, and media coverage. Before long, the practical details begin receiving more attention than the family relationships everyone originally hoped to see improve. Throughout this entire situation, one message appears to have remained consistent from the palace's perspective. The institution comes first, official procedures come first, established planning comes first. Those priorities may not satisfy everyone, but they appear to have guided the decisions made during this visit. Whether that approach ultimately strengthens the monarchy or prolongs family tensions is something only time will answer. History often looks very different once emotions settle and more information becomes available. Today's headline is rarely the final chapter. The same applies to Harry's relationship with his father. Public disagreements do not necessarily determine what happens privately in the years ahead. Circumstances change. Priorities change. Opportunities arise when people least expect them. While this visit may not have produced the reunion many hoped for, it does not automatically close the door on future possibilities. The relationship between King Charles and Harry has experienced many difficult moments over recent years, yet stories involving families often continue evolving long after the headlines fade. That is why it would be premature to assume that one unsuccessful visit defines the future forever. For now, however, the reported outcome remains clear. The accommodation request did not move forward. The anticipated family reunion reportedly will not happen during this visit. The palace has publicly defended its position, Harry's side has offered its own account, and the wider debate surrounding responsibility, communication, security, and family relationships continues. As with so many royal stories, this chapter ends with more questions than answers. Will future visits be planned differently? Will communication improve? Will both sides eventually find common ground away from public attention? Those questions remain open, and they will likely continue shaping royal coverage in the months ahead. No matter where you stand on this story, one thing is difficult to deny. It has never been just about one room inside Buckingham Palace. It has become a symbol of something much larger: trust, expectations, responsibility, and the complicated balance between private family relationships and public duty. That balance has challenged generations of the royal family, and it continues to do so today. Perhaps that is why this story has captured so much attention around the world. People are not only following the headlines, they are watching a family attempt to navigate incredibly difficult circumstances, while every decision is examined under an international spotlight. Some viewers sympathize more with Harry. Others believe King Charles had little choice but to stand firm. Many simply hope that, regardless of today's disagreements, there will eventually be a path toward greater understanding. Only time will reveal whether that happens. Until then, this story remains unfinished, with every new development adding another piece to a much larger picture. Now we'd love to hear from you. Do you think the palace made the right decision by sticking to its reported procedures, or do you believe more flexibility could have helped move the family closer to reconciliation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation is far from over. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more updates, and share it with anyone who enjoys following royal stories. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.